Guys, have you ever wondered if it was only the voters in South Africa who really had their votes and demanded for the call of the GNU, or probably there was some other external funding that actually helped the GNU come together? This is actually what Donald Trump seems to be actually exposing here in this video, where he's actually reading out page by page, line by line, the ridiculous, what he calls ridiculous anyway, programs that USAID under the Biden administration. And also, I think he traces it down to from 1990, Social Security in the US, the kind of like really crazy spending that the US has actually been going through. I think there was one of those that really blew my mind away. He actually said that, I think the government had spending on social security to people aged 200 years and above or something like that. I was really, it was just really, but anyway, this is how he described the kind of corruption and fraud that has been going on in the US, and that his regime won't take it anymore. But one of the things that strike us for our channel here in Kwazemi is, there were these kind of really interesting funded programs in Africa that actually really resound for me. First of all, he actually argued that, in Uganda, I remember once General Museveni, President Yoweri Museveni of Uganda, really stood up against what he called the normalization of abnormality. So this was the time when it appeared that NGOs in Uganda were trying to really push for the normalization of the LGBT community in Uganda. And it was a really kind of like really trying time for Uganda, because the General Museveni himself decided that, I think at the level of the parliament, that they would not allow LGBT to become legal in Uganda. I think they were blacklisted from US foreign policy or something like that. And I remember, I think I watched a video where there was this American NGO who actually was praising General Museveni, president of Uganda, for really saving, and confronting the US. Although I think the Ugandan parliamentarians took some sanctions at that time because they stood up against what felt like an imposition of the LGBT community. So Donald Trump here is actually arguing that some part of USAID, or probably funding, taxpayer money in the USA anyway, was given to the tune of 42 million to Johns Hopkins University to conduct research on what he calls social and behavioral change in Uganda. You see, so this kind of funding that actually goes on to really kind of like carry out behavioral change in another country in Africa, for me was really mind-blowing. He spoke about how Mozambique received 10 million for what he calls voluntary medical circumcision, all right, for males, all right. So there was taxpayer money from the US going to fund voluntary circumcision in Mozambique. I'm really wondering what are our own governments doing? Why aren't we able to raise the funds needed to carry out? Why do we have to wait for funding from outside to be able to carry out or fund things like voluntary circumcision? That's something like really, it's really personal. It's really, I really don't know. These kind of things really make me, I'm just asking many questions. Trump also actually questioned, you watch these things yourself, you're going to watch them yourself, but I'm just giving a summary because it's really interesting to me. He speaks about how India got 21 million for voter turnout, all right? So, it appears that the voters didn't usually turn out in India. And in Nigeria also, it's the same. I noticed that many times when some politicians in Nigeria want people to come out to vote for their parties, they actually have bags of rice and, what in Nigeria we call tin tomatoes. So there were these tomatoes and all, and they package them in these small pieces and give to people. So it actually appears that most of those campaigns, and I saw the ANC also doing the same. I think it was this door-to-door campaign and all that. So I saw, so those campaigns, for example, seem to be coming from external, because for India, for example, it says here that India received $21 million for voter turnout. And I'm trying to really make sense of what that really means. And remember that India is a BRICS nation, all right? It's one of the countries we are hoping that if things go south in South Africa, they might be able to fill in. But here we are, Donald Trump actually arguing that he's not castigating India anyway in that regard. He's not actually saying that India is actually probably an enemy or something, but he's just wondering how, with the wealth India has, why does America have to send 21 million also to India thereabout. So he's also speaking about how Liberia got 1.5 million for voter confidence. And I don't know how that kind of funding works. And also in Mali, 14 million for social cohesion. We know that Mali had this problem with military coup, and then the AES Confederation, which is now going on with Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, forming a consortium, so to speak, away from ECOWAS. He actually argues that Mali got 14 million for social cohesion. And then what's kind of like the most interesting part for me in this video is that South Africa got 2.5 million for inclusive democracy. 2.5 million. So I'm really asking myself if probably what he calls inclusive democracy, is this what the GNU was all about? Or is this sort of like what then built up to the formation of what might have been a coalition between some parties in South Africa, like several parties rather than an ANC majority? And so is this what gave birth probably to the idea of the GNU? 2.5 million from the United States to South Africa for inclusive democracy. So these are kind of questions that this video actually really raises in me, to me. And I really thought that it would really be interesting for us to really understand. But he really breaks down more and more of what he calls fraud from USAID funding that actually has been, or other funding anyway, foreign aid from the United States that has been, given from taxpayer money to fund this, what Donald Trump calls ridiculous programs in other parts of the world. Let's quickly listen to Donald Trump break down these things. Really, really shocking details. And share your thoughts in the comments.
But look at this, from 90 to 99, Social Security, 6,054,000 people. Well, that's okay. Maybe that's possible. 90 to 99, maybe it's possible. It's a lot of people, though, at that. But people that live to 100 to 109, 4,734,000. Wow, that's a lot. That means over 100 years old. They're 4 million people. I don't know too many. I know people that are doing great in their 90s, but not too many people over 100. But over 120, from 120 years old, people that are 120 years old up to 129, 3,472,000 people. Wow. That can't possibly be, because the record is like, I think it's one person, a woman, lived to 127, but they have 3,472. Okay, but now we're going really in. People from 130 years old to 139-year-old, 3,936,000. Wow. I wonder if people are getting paid with all this. I mean, are these checks? And that's what we're checking right now. People from 140 years old to 149 years old, 3,542,000, 140 years old and beyond. Now we're really going, because we're looking to break the record by 25 years. People from 150 years old to 159 years old, 1,345,000. These are by the way, these are in the computer files. This is what they do well. They're super. I asked Elon, who are these Doge people? He said they're super brilliant computer people and they love the country. It's simple. Wait a minute. People from 160 years old to 169 years, 121,000. So 160-year-old people. 170 to 179,000, 6,087. But now, let's go into the real numbers. From 200 to 209 years old, 879 people. From 210 years old, I haven't met any of them. And if I did, I would bless them. I would worship the ground they walk on. 210 to 219 years, 866. From 220 years old to 229 years old, 1,039. And then you have two people, from 240 years old to 249 years old, one person. And there's one person that's 360 years old. That's just that. And then, where's the money being spent, right? Let's go into that for just a second. $520 million for a consultant on the environment. It's called Environmental, Social, and Governance. Investments in Africa. and mobilize private sector resources. $520 million. Somebody got $520 million for an environmental, sounds like an environmental study. I've always been one that paid a lot of money for my environmental studies, but I paid like $50,000, not $520 million. $520 million for ESG. $25 million to promote biodiversity, conservation, and promote licit livelihoods by developing socially responsible behavior in the country of Colombia. Well, it's nice, $25 million to go into Colombia for something that nobody ever heard of. $40 million to improve the social and economic inclusion of sedentary migrants. $40 million. $42 million for Johns Hopkins, great place, to research and drive social and behavior change in Uganda. $42 million. What about us? What about social change in our country? $70 million for a center at Purdue to research university-sourced, evidence-based solutions to developmental challenges. I mean, these are massive numbers on things that nobody ever heard about. $10 million for Mozambique voluntary medical male circumcisions. $10 million for circumcisions in another country. $9.7 million for UC Berkeley to develop a cohort of Cambodian youth with enterprise-driven skills. In other words, let's teach them something about enterprise. What about our people? Can't we teach them about enterprise? $2.3 million for strengthening independent voices in Cambodia. $32 million to the Prague Civil Society Center, which is a very liberal group of people. Wonder how much of that money came back to the people that approved it. $14 million for improving public procurement in Serbia. $486 million to the Consortium for Elections and Political Process Strengthening, including $22 million for inclusive and participatory political process in Moldova, and $21 million for voter turnout in India. Well, why are we giving $21 million to India? They got a lot of money. They're one of the highest taxing countries in the world in terms of us. We can hardly get in there because their tariffs are so high. I have a lot of respect for India. I have a lot of respect for the Prime Minister. He just left, as you know, 2 days ago. But we're giving $21 million for voter turnout. It's voter turnout in India. What about like voter turnout here? Oh, we've done that, I guess. We did $500 million, didn't we? It's called the lockboxes. $20 million for fiscal federalism in Nepal. Listen to these numbers. This is all fraud. $19 million for biodiversity conservation in Nepal. $1.5 million for voter confidence. We want to give them confidence in Liberia. $14 million for social cohesion in Mali. $2.5 million for inclusive democracies in South Africa. $47 million for improving learning outcomes in Asia. Asia's doing very well. They're doing a lot better than we do in the schools, aren't they? $2 million to develop sustainable recycling models to increase socioeconomic cohesion among marginalized communities in Kosovo and Escali and in Egypt. We're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars. I could, by the way, I could read this all day long. I could go on all day long, and you'll see hundreds of billions of dollars, and we're doing it. But when I saw the Social Security numbers, I said, wow, that's really something. So we have, let's just go above 100 years old. We have millions and millions of people over 100 years old. Everybody knows that's not so. We have a very corrupt country, and it's a sad thing to say, but we're figuring it out. Now, the good thing about Social Security and what I read is if you take all of those numbers off, because they're obviously fraudulent or incompetent, but if you take all of those millions of people off Social Security, all of a sudden we have a very powerful Social Security with people that are 80 and 70 and 90, but not 200 years old. So it's a very positive.